Well, hey, you guys. So I'm jumping into something that has been a challenge for a lot of us, keeping our budget simple. So I recently stumbled across a video from another creator here on YouTube who shares some pretty solid advice on this topic. So today I'm just reacting to his tips and sharing what I would apply or tweak in my own budgeting strategy. And make sure to stick around to the end because I'm revealing 3 of my favorite personal tips for keeping your budget simple, and you don't want to miss it. All right, tip number 1 from this creator was to simplify categories. So keep your budget categories broad. Now, I love this piece of advice because for me, I like the idea where it's kind of a bigger bucket. Things are going to come in. You don't want to complicate things, too much because if you're so nitpicky, it's kind of like, okay, where does this thing go? Where does that go? And again, you're kind of simplifying those categories. It makes it quicker to be able to say, hey, here's where this is. So if, maybe a Costco run, for instance, in one category, and instead of sitting down with that long receipt and assigning it to different things, maybe you just plop it all into a Costco category. That's what we do. And again, it makes the process when it comes to budgeting so much faster and more effective for me. I like this. This is kind of what Winston and I do. But I will say month to month, little things will come up like Caroline's birthday. So that's a line item right now because she wants to go skating. So we're like, okay, we're gonna put that there. We have a trip this month. So we're gonna put a line item there. So we will add kind of specific categories depending on what's going on. But our month to month, when we use the EveryDollar budget and it goes and it duplicates the month, I would say 90% of the budget stays the exact same. So using those bigger categories, again, I like it because it's kind of more of a catch-all. All right, his tip number 2 is use technology wisely. So here they suggest using budgeting apps and tools to keep track of your spending. And obviously, I'm all for that. It just mentions EveryDollar, which is a budgeting app that I recommend. I love it. It is such a fantastic tool, again, to keep your budget going in real time. It's really user-friendly. You're able to track your transactions. And it goes with the zero-based budgeting method, which is what I like, with your income at the top and then all the categories underneath by priority. It's really important. So I love that. Use technology. I think it's great. All right, tip number 3, emergency fund priority. So this is a big one. The first step of the 7 baby steps is to get a $1,000 starter emergency funds. And, obviously I stand behind this advice. And having that financial safety net of margin in the bank is so huge. And you can start small, but it's going to grow over time, meaning that you're going to have that $1,000. And then once you become debt free, you're going to bump that up to 3 to 6 months of expenses. And so again, allocating spending is so key, especially if you're on one of those 2 steps. And having it at the top to build up that buffer and to build up that emergency fund is really key. So I like this too because you're able to prioritize what you want. And so that savings needs to be towards the top of your budget to make sure that you do it. To get that $1,000, or again, if you're out of debt, the 3 to 6 months of expenses, fully funded emergency fund. All right, tip number 4 is round. So this is an interesting one, rounding down your paycheck in your budget. So for example, if you make, $1,656, you would budget for $1,600. So you round down. Now I get why this is kind of appealing because it's going to force you then to have a cushion, because if you're only budgeting, $1,600, that other $56 or whatever it is just going to be around. And that's, I guess, for this person is saying, well, it's great because it'll automatically give you that cushion. But what I would say, though, is to plan for that $56. And maybe it is for savings. Maybe it is for a miscellaneous category, which I think everyone should have, by the way, in your budget. You need a miscellaneous category. But I do like the idea of budgeting every single dollar. And there's something gratifying that when even my paycheck hits, I literally change it in the EveryDollar budget to the exact dollar amount, because it's just I'm going to squeeze out every dollar I can to budget. Because I don't know, it's just, I like that it feels better. I feel like you have more control over every single dollar that's coming in. All right, tip number 5, regular check-ins. So regular check-ins with your budget, it is essential. So don't just set up your budget and forget it. I think a lot of people feel like, okay, well, I did my budget, that's great. And then they move on with their life. But your budget is there to be in your life. Almost on a daily basis, you guys, just to know, hey, what's going on? And so that you have that control, you know what's in each category. And I would say this too, make it a habit that you kind of just check in. And maybe you start off with every 2 to 3 days, or maybe once a week. So maybe it's Monday, I'm going to review the budget and look at it. But again, when you use an app like EveryDollar, it's just so easy to check in and track your transactions and kind of know where you're at, that for me, it's a part of what I do. I'm terrible. I unlock my phone and literally the apps I go to is Instagram, the weather app, and $Every. I just sit there and I'm like, oh, here. So just kind of make it part of that routine. Let's all admit we're semi-addicted to our phones. And I just think, make that part of the addiction because it actually is going to be good. It's going to be good. Okay, so now that I've reacted to some of that advice, as promised, here are my top 3 tips for keeping your budget simple. But before I get into those, I want to tell you about a faith-based alternative to health insurance that can make healthcare more affordable. Christian Healthcare Ministries. CHM allows members to share each other's healthcare costs, and it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So step 1, choose the healthcare provider you want. Step 2, submit your eligible bills. And step 3, get reimbursed. CHM members take care of your eligible medical bills. And with no networks and the freedom to choose your healthcare provider, CHM is the best option for Christians who want to take care of their families and help other believers. So to find out more, go to chministries.org/budget. All right, so here are my tips again to simplify your budget. Number 1, reward yourself. So reward yourself when you hit a major financial milestone. Now, this is different than little treat culture that is out there. So I'm not saying every little thing you do, you just go and reward yourself and spend all that money. But celebrate those big wins. And one of those might be sticking to the budget. Maybe you do the budget for the first month and it's terrible. The second month, though, you're like, oh, it worked. Okay, so enjoy that. Like, celebrate that. Or maybe there's a debt that you're like, are we ever going to pay this off? And then once it's paid off, then it's like, okay, we're going to go treat ourselves, right? And I'm not talking about spending like a crazy amount of money. Obviously, we want to be realistic, but enjoy life through that process. I think getting new habits and gaining traction, it takes a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice. So there is times to let yourself live a little bit and enjoy life. All right, tip number 2 is give yourself grace. And this one is huge, you guys, because typically with your budget, if you've never done one before, it's going to take about 3 months to get it to work. So do not beat yourself up if you don't get it right away. Be patient and allow yourself to find the time to really make it work. And I'll say this too. Our budget throughout the month, we change it. So I want you to hear that. Things come up and other categories have to adjust. Or maybe you forgot, like, oh yeah, we had this in the budget and it's not happening anymore, so we can take it out. Well, there's some money left over. What are we going to do with that? So throughout the month, it's going to change, and that's okay. But give yourself some grace. Nobody's perfect when it comes to this stuff. All right, tip number 3 is make it visual. So this is a really important part of budgeting. You don't just want it in your head. A lot of people are like, well, I have all my numbers in my head. It's going to be really hard to keep track of that, you guys. So having something that you can see the progress, that you're able to adjust very easily, and you're able to really say, okay, I'm going to be able to make changes and I can do it and visually see the numbers. And I do think too, sometimes money can be really stressful and it's so much in our heads, but when you get things down on paper or visually in front of you, it really helps simplify to say, okay, like this is where we're at. Here's the reality, not something I'm making up in my head. Here's the reality. And it just gives you power back and control. All right, you guys, that's it. Some ways to simplify your budgets, which I think is so, so important. And so with these tips, again, have some patience, but create your budget for you and your lifestyle and your life. And since your paycheck is a major part of making your budget, I have a great video on paycheck routines that you should check out so that you know exactly what you're getting when it comes to doing a budget. So you guys remember to take control of your money and create a life you love.